Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. Quick video today on some radical changes being proposed by Stefano Domenicali to change the entire structure of a regular Formula 1 weekend, bringing sprint races practically every single time, using a reverse grid order for the sprints, and then even giving away points for practice. What's going on here? Is this going to happen? Is it good? Is it bad? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you are new as always. So Stefano Domenicali of the Formula 1 group, right, the head guy effectively, has proposed for quite some time making some serious changes to the way the weekend is run. Effectively what he thinks is, which maybe is understandable, that people really only tune in for the race and for qualifying. Friday is kind of pointless because practice is practice, no one watches it, which I guess, okay, the numbers imply that is true, but actually I think practice can be really entertaining to watch and can give you some interesting insight. And also, you know, I like the fact that the commentators talk about stuff that's not just going on track. I don't know, I personally enjoy practice. I don't always watch it, in fairness, but you know, I still kind of enjoy it. And I think it's important, right? The teams need to go to the weekends and actually have some time to get data and testing and stuff, even though I think seemingly Domenicali would prefer if they were just to go in dry and hope that their setup worked effectively, which would be kind of interesting. So apparently what he wants to do, and we've even seen this before, that, you know, potentially going to more sprint races, right? So I think we had 3 last year, 3 this year to replace qualifying, and the rumor had it they wanted to do 6 next year that got turned down, and they're still only doing 3. Now, you know, as he says here, there is a need that cannot be postponed to have even more show in Formula 1. Now, it's an interesting one, right? Because you look at football or other sports, just because there's a boring 0-0 draw doesn't mean they change the entire format of the way the game is played. But apparently Stefano wants to do exactly that. So he said that, okay, well, yeah, look, these reverse grids, which you do get in some kind of, some categories of motorsport, which I personally think are really gimmicky. But like, and the drivers have had comments on this before, because it has been proposed before, and they've said, like, I think that's a terrible idea. But, you know, of course, he's seen recently these races and think, well, that's pretty fun when, you know, Verstappen's P14 and is making passes, like, rather than just driving away from the front. So, you know, having reshuffles, more overtaking can make the race more entertaining. So I get his perspective, right? He's looking at it from the perspective of a lot of newer fans that are coming in through, you know, Drive to Survive, right, that don't really understand all, you know, maybe the intricacies of motorsport and Formula 1, but they just want entertainment. They just want, like, racing and action every single day. That's the direction he's coming at it from. Whether any of this is a good idea or actually improves the actual product that Formula 1 provides is, I think, a big question mark to me. So, as he says, we've won over a non-racing audience by creating different content, namely Drive to Survive type stuff. The championship is followed by X amount of people, like, you know, all this type of stuff. Goes on to say the following: you have to try and implement new ideas. There are always many excuses not to do it. It's a life principle. Purists will always turn up their noses, but over the years, F1 has changed the way of qualifying dozens of times. This, of course, is true. The way that qualifying has worked in the past isn't necessarily the way it works today, but, you know, one might argue that over time they've developed into a superior way of doing qualifying to what it used to be in the past. And as he says, it's a need that cannot be postponed to have even more show. In a normal weekend, the one consisting of free practice 1 and 2 on Friday, each session should be given away either points or single qualifying laps, or a qualification for a different and short Saturday race instead of the third free practice, perhaps with the mechanism of a reverse grid. So his proposal seemingly is do 2 practice sessions on a Friday, a sprint race on Saturday every weekend. I think even MotoGP brought this in recently, even though it's, you know, the fans hated the idea, but yet they pushed ahead and did it anyway, because I suppose, like, look, if there's a race on Saturday, then more people are going to watch, right? And, you know, nowadays everyone's competing for viewership numbers. I get it, right? From the kind of business perspective, I understand it. From the quality of the actual product and the racing that it provides, like, I'm not a big fan of sprint races in general, just because if qualifying is kind of interesting or upset by weather or crashes or red flags or whatever, then, you know, drivers that are out of position can just change their position in the sprint race, to which point the grid looks normal by the time we get to the Sunday Grand Prix. So I actually think sprints can make the weekends less interesting than they would otherwise be. But I suppose a reverse grid for the sprint race could make things interesting, right? So, I mean, let's just dive into this. So his idea is, first of all, that maybe at the end of a practice session, you have like a 10-minute, or, you know, maybe you just have a one-shot qualifying-esque window where the drivers just go out and do a lap, and then whoever gets the fastest lap gets a championship point or something. Like, that is really strange to me, because practice, the whole point is to test the car, to try to try setups, to gather information for the weekend, and having to like set up your practice session for a quali sim at the end to try and get the championship points, like that's a pretty big deal, right? Every single weekend, Williams would just be absolutely trying to maximize their potential in practice to try and get whatever championship points might be on offer, right? So I understand the idea of trying to give away points every day of the weekend, but I don't get it for practice. I think that's a terrible idea. Now, the reverse grid thing for the sprint races is interesting, right? The idea that, okay, you do a qualification thing at the end of practice 2, or you just seed the sprint race based on the results from free practice 2, which is like, I don't know what that's about, but maybe you do, and then you just invert it, right? But like, I don't know. I really don't like the idea of reverse grid. To me, it seems so gimmicky. Maybe it's fun the first couple of times you watch it, but like the idea of Latifi leading into turn 1 is like, there's no merit involved there, right? And I guess, yeah, it makes it more entertaining because the best drivers have to fight their way through the field and stuff. But to me, it kind of throws competitive integrity out the window. And also, if you're doing qualifying and you know it's a reverse grid, like, does that not give a massive incentive? I know that maybe you get points for qualifying in this sense, but if I'm Max Verstappen, like, why would I try and go fastest in qualifying if I'm just going to get put 20th on the grid? Like, surely I'm going to, like, everyone's going to be fighting to go as slow as they possibly can. I personally think this is just super gimmicky, and I don't think it actually adds to the quality of the sport. Maybe you guys disagree and you think that it can be more entertaining, and I agree. Maybe there's an element in which, the weekend could be made more interesting by certain factors, but like, I don't personally think this is the way to go. But yeah, seemingly he's pretty gung-ho on this, right? He wants to bring in either all of this stuff or some of this stuff over the coming years. We'll see what changes he decides to make, or if he even has the power to do so if the teams like resoundingly veto it, for example. But as he says, we've put a lot of things on the table, including the reverse grid. The drivers will be vehemently against this, especially the ones from the top teams. Many say no, but we have seen on some occasions the beauty of having reshuffles in the race and more overtaking. We have an obligation to try. So, maybe this is true to a certain extent, but at the same time, it's like, look, how many regular sports do you see just changing the rules willy-nilly just to try and make things more entertaining if it's not at the cost of other things? I don't even like sprint races in the first place. Giving away points for practice, I don't really get it, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, maybe you guys disagree. Like, obviously, some people would say, yes, reverse grid for sprints would be pretty interesting. If there's only I don't necessarily hate it if there's only 3 sprint races or something. Like, I think it's not good for the actual competition and the nature of it, but maybe for 3 races a year to have it, okay, maybe it does generate some increased interest for those particular weekends. If you do it every weekend, I think it's going to get old and people are not going to be tuning in for, wow, it's a sprint race. Like, if it's every weekend and it's always a reverse grid with Latifi starting a pole, it's we've seen this before a little bit, right? And I get the idea maybe to try and shorten down practice, like the idea of maybe only having FP1 and FP2 and getting rid of FP3, I think it's not actually a bad idea, right? I don't mind having something else instead of FP3, just because, do we need 3 hours of practice? I think it can make the race more interesting, just having 2 hours of practice, maybe on a Friday, at which point then the teams have to make the call on what they do with their car setup for qualifying, because, and maybe some teams get it right, maybe some teams get it wrong, creates a more interesting affair, rather than by the time it comes round to a Saturday after FP3, most teams have pretty much got their car in the best possible situation because they're pretty good. You take 1 hour away, then maybe it does add, an element of skill gap to the teams that can figure it out most quickly over those 2 hours rather than the 3. Maybe there's some advantages to that. So, having only 2 practice sessions and then doing something else on the Saturday morning, maybe that's viable, but, replacing that with a sprint race every weekend, I'm not a big fan of it, but maybe you guys have different thoughts in the comment section below. But very much enjoyed your thoughts down there. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you are new, take care, and I'll see you next time.